Hey all y'all, welcome back to my channel. My name is Carrie. This is where I talk about knitting, my tips, my tricks, my opinions, and my preferences. I love knitting in the round, but you knew that because I've been doing a whole bunch of videos on knitting in the round, and I got a new one for this month. And it was requested after I asked people's opinion, and that is how to knit small circumferences with two circular needles. Yes, I've tried so many other things. I have done the DPNs, I have done the 9-inch circulars, I have done the flexible DPNs, I have done magic loop, and every single time I come back to two circular needles. I don't think this method, quite frankly, gets talked about enough, and so today I'm going to share with you the basics of this technique. So if you want to find out all about this, hit subscribe, hit the notification bell, give this video a thumbs up, and let's knit. When it comes to two circular needles, in some ways it's a bit of a mystery to myself why this is my favorite way to knit small circumferences. Some of it I have a logical reason for. I'm going to pull out this project right now. This is a sock that I'm currently knitting. If you follow me on Instagram, my social media, you have seen pictures of this sock. I'm past the flap and I'm right now working the gusset and starting to work the foot of the sock. Socks in particular, I love using two circular needles because I love the organization that it provides, because it just makes sense to me to have the sock divided in half like this when I am working. And I did a flap and gusset. So while I was working this flap, this circular needle I was utilizing to work flat, while this circular needle back here was just acting as a stitch holder, hanging out, nothing to worry about. It's just a very easy, quick way to deal with needle management when you're doing socks. But in some ways, it's just a preference. I just like the feel of the needle management more with two circular needles than all the other methods that I've tried. So, at the end of the day, you might try this and be like, nope, not for me. And I get why, because every technique has its pros and cons, but for me, two circular needles, the pros of it far outweigh any drawbacks. So there is a very simple rule when it comes to circular knitting, and it is this: needles stuck together, knit together. The way this technique works is you cast on all your stitches, and then the stitches get evenly divided between the two sets of circulars. And then as you're knitting, the first half of your stitches get knitted with one set of circulars. When you finish that half, you turn, and then you knit the second half with the second set of circular needles. Today, for demonstration purposes, I'm actually going to utilize two different types of needles. I have my Knitter's Pride Cubics Nova Platina, which I love, and I have my Knitter's Pride Carbons needles. These are both size 10 needles. I'm utilizing these two different looking needles so that you can very clearly see what's going on as I am setting up and I'm knitting in the round utilizing this technique. But I wanted to explain why I'm going to demonstrate utilizing two circular needles with different tips, but why I would never actually do that. One of the things that people sometimes struggle with this technique is they grab the wrong needle and they finish, and all of a sudden they realize that now all their stitches are on one circular needle. That is a pitfall that can happen. Sometimes, oftentimes, a tip people will give is, in order to avoid that and to make sure that you're always knitting with the correct needle when you utilize this technique, is they will recommend that you utilize two different needle tips. So maybe you use one set would be metal and the other set would be carbons. I don't recommend that you do this, personally. I recommend that if you're going to use two circular needles, you use the same type of needle in the same sizes. Everything can affect gauge, basically. It's basic rule of knitting life. Pretty much everything can affect your gauge. So if you're utilizing one type of needle on half of your stitches, like a bamboo needle on half of your stitches, and the other half of your stitches, you're using another material, you could have a slight gauge difference between the two halves of your knitting. Personally, I would just rather not even have to worry about it and just utilize the same type of needle for both sides. If you watched my video on casting on with DPNs, how you cast on with two circular needles is actually really similar, if not almost exactly the same, except the number of needles involved. So let's jump into it. I got my yarn here. And you know what? Today I'm gonna do something different. Today I'm gonna go ahead and cast on utilizing a knitted cast on. I almost always cast on using a long tail cast on, but why not be a little different today and utilize a different technique? So I'm gonna go ahead and just cast on all my stitches onto one needle. So I'm gonna cast on, I think I'm gonna go ahead and cast on like just 20 stitches, maybe 30. We'll see. We'll see how I feel. I have all my stitches casted on. Now, just like with the DPNs, when I did that video, I'm now going to take my needle and I'm going to transfer half of my stitches onto my second needle. So, I have 30, so 15 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 12, 13, 14, 15. Okay. So I transfer the stitches and I'm gonna pull this needle out like this. I have half my stitches on needle number 1, which is my front needle, and I have half my stitches on needle number 2, which is the back half of my knitting. Once again, we got the rule, and I'm gonna say it 100 times, okay? This is the drinking game rule. Needles stuck together, knit together. What that means is these two needle tips on my front half, they are stuck together. They are joined together on the same cable. So I'm going to knit the front half of my stitches with this circular needle. So what I'm going to do now is pull needle number 1 to my left so that I can get the stitches up on the needle tip and join in the round. This needle number 2, is just going to act like a stitch holder for right now and hold these stitches while you work your first half of the circumference. So I'm going to just join together, and I'm going to just knit around now. So that front half of my stitches are done. Now I'm going to drop this needle, just drop it, and take this needle, pull it through like that. Now I'm going to turn my work, and now I've got to set up to knit my second half. So again, needles stuck together, knit together. I want to knit with my needle number 2 now. So again, here are my stitches. I'm going to go to the back, the end of this half of stitches, grab my needle from the back and pull. And then get my stitches up on the right needle of needle number 2. And then I will continue knitting these last 15 stitches to the end of the round. There we go. That is my first round complete with my 2 circular needles. And as you can see, it's a pretty straightforward technique. The most important thing about it is just making sure that when you knit, you follow the rule, needles stuck together, knit together. But you might also be going, oh, I don't know, that seems like a lot of floppy cables going on. And you're not wrong. And I will say at the beginning of this technique, when you're doing the first couple rounds, the cables, there's a lot going on, and it feels like there's a lot going on with the cables, or at least there can feel like there's a lot going on with the cables, but I feel like that's true regardless of what technique you utilize. So let me share with you some of the finer points on how to utilize this technique in a way that hopefully will be really comfortable for you. So what do I do to make sure that I don't pick up the wrong needle? Well, it's very simple. What I do, and I'm not going to say this is foolproof because it's not, but don't worry, I will talk to you about what to do when you make the mistake of knitting with the wrong needle tip. We'll go over that. But what I knew to avoid picking up the wrong needle tip is very simple. With my left hand, I grab the cable coming out of the last stitch on the round I'm about to knit and lift from the behind like this. If I make sure that I'm grabbing the cable, right, of my needle tip and then pick up my needle, I'm not going to pick up the wrong needle. So that's how I avoid it. It's very simple. It's just a very simple way of doing this. And now I'm going to just start knitting around. So I'm now at the end. I'm going to turn my work, drop that needle, and now I need to pick up my needle number 2. But how I'm going to do that, because remember, this makes sense too, because you got to pull these stitches up on your needle. So I'm going to just come here to the back of the work. You know, I just make sure I grab it, lift up, and pull. And then I get these stitches back up here on the needle. And I can keep knitting in the round. I would never, like I said, I would never utilize 2 different needle tips. I would personally, I just rely on making sure that when I go to switch needles, that I grab the cable of the needle that I want to work with and pull, and the needle is in my hand and I don't have a problem. But sometimes I do make a mistake, and I will show you what to do if you accidentally knit with the wrong needle tip. Let's say I have an absent-minded moment. It can happen. And I don't do my normal thing of pulling the cable from the back and thus picking up my correct needle tip. Let's say I go ahead and I just take my stitches and I shove them up like this. And then I go to work and I just absentmindedly pick up this needle, similar as what I would do if I was utilizing magic loop, right? Let's just say I did that by accident. And I just start working away. And both of my needle tips are the same, so I'm not even noticing, don't even notice that I'm working 2 different needles. All right. Oh, crap. Oops, I did it again. I used the wrong needle, and now my work is off this. This is not a big deal if this happens. Now all my needles are here on one needle, very similar to magic loop. So what am I going to do? It's very simple. I'm just going to get my needles situated around. I'm going to get these stitches up on here, thusly. Okay. I'm going to knit off this half of my stitches with what was needle number 2, and this is just going to become my needle number 1. So this is a pretty simple fix if you grab the wrong needle in the way that I just did. Sometimes I have where I've just gotten to knitting and somehow gotten to magic loop thinking and knitted with my needle 2 tip from my needle 1 tip. But this isn't, like I said, a pretty easy fix because the stitches are fine. I just have to work this off and boom, I'm right back up to my previous setup. It's just now what was my needle number 2 is now my needle number 1. not that big of a deal. Normally what I do to avoid grabbing the wrong tip is I grab the needle from the back like this and bring it over, and that does it. I have on occasion, without thinking about it, for some reason, my stitches are already up on the needle. Usually what's happened is I've gotten my stitches up on the needle to continue knitting in the round, and I had to put my work down for some reason, so I just put it down like that. And then when I go to pick up, I don't grab this back needle. This is my needle number 2 now. I don't grab my needle number 2 back needle. I grab my needle number 1 back needle. And I bring it around. And again, because I usually am utilizing the same tips, I don't realize that I've grabbed the wrong needle, and I just start knitting. Thusly. Uh-oh. I have a loose needle. But here's the thing that's really crazy about when this happens. Notice now all of my stitches are on one needle, but I've got one needle going off in this direction and the other needle is going off in the opposite direction. And if I turn my work, I have no needle tip here to work my stitches off of. So what do I do in this case? Again, this is not a hard fix. All I have to do is slip my stitches back. I can really slip my stitches from either side of the work and it's fine. I'm gonna go ahead and just slip all of these stitches back onto the second needle, thusly. People really worry about grabbing the wrong needle and ending up in these situations. But the fix is actually pretty simple. And because you're normally utilizing this technique with small circumferences, you're not usually dealing with like hundreds and hundreds of stitches to do this. So it's something that I don't think really should, I'm not going to tell you how to feel about making these sorts of errors utilizing this technique. I'm just going to say that if these errors are made, they're not difficult to fix. Either you're going to be able to knit off your next set of stitches with your freed needle, or you slip stitches back onto your freed needle, and then you're fine. Okay, so you might have been noticing something as I've been working these various rounds of knitting, which is, and this is, I think, a genuine drawback to this technique, which is you got a lot of needles flopping around. Now, me personally, this does not bother me. When I go to knit, there is some things I do to make sure that my needles are kind of staying out of the way. One of them is, you'll notice the way the needles hang down like this naturally. Before I start my next round, the needles that I'm not knitting with, the back set of needles, all right, the needles furthest away from me, I make sure that they get pointed down like this so that they just hang down like this, and I ignore them. Whatever they're doing from that point on, I ignore them. I know that for some people, that is way easier said than done, that they can't ignore this, that this will always annoy them, having these needles kind of back here, dangling around, moving around. If this is something that you can just never get past, this may not be the technique for you, and that's fine, that's great. You gotta find the needle setups and techniques that work best for you. This is one of them. This happens to be my favorite, but if it's not for you, it's not for you. That being said, if you don't like them just hanging down, something you can do is take the needle and just sort of poke it into the fabric. Now, to do this, it helps to have some rounds done. You normally need some rounds done to do this, but you can always take your needle tips and just sort of poke them into the cast on edge like this. And that will keep them more contained and out of the way. Now, this tube that I'm knitting right now, in some ways isn't really like long enough to really be doing this technique, or I should tip, this trick effectively, but it can be done. Obviously, if you're going to utilize 2 circular needles and you have interchangeable needles, you're going to need 4 needle tips. And usually, almost always, your interchangeable needles will not have 2 sets of each size. So you're only going to get 2 tips of a size 10 6mm needle. So does that mean you have to go out and buy a second set of interchangeable needles so that you can do 2 circular needles? No. No, you don't. At least not a full set. We'll get into that. When you are knitting in the round with 1 circular needle, right? The needle that is in your right hand is always the same needle, right? Because you're knitting in the round and you never turn your work, your right needle is always the same needle in your setup. The same is true when you are knitting in the round with 2 circular needles. The needle in your right hand is always the same. And the needle in your right hand is actually the needle that sizes your stitches. The left hand needle can be a different size and not affect your gauge. You can set up your interchangeable needles for this type of 2 circular setup without needing 4 tips of the same size. You can use 2 different size tips. For this setup, I need to have the needle that's going to size my stitches, which is my size 10 6mm needle, on the left end of the cable as it faces me, okay? So I'm going to show you how I set this up so I don't screw it up, because I keep screwing it up, trust me. So here's cable number 1. Cable number 1, this is the left side of my cable. This tip that's on this end is the one that ends up in my right hand. So I'm going to put this in here thusly. Now I'm going to take my smaller needle here, and I'm going to put this on my right side. I realized I should have done this with the silver needle since I'm using my black desk, but it is what it is. I'm not changing things up now. And now, when I go to knit this set, I grab my larger needle, and I can feel it's my larger needle, so I don't worry about making that mistake. And look how easily, too, the stitches come up on the needle, because it's a smaller needle, so the stitches actually come up more easily. So there's some nice advantages to utilizing a smaller needle tip for your left-hand needle. And I'll be able to work those stitches off. And the other thing, too, is I can feel the difference in the needle size, so it's unlikely that I'm going to knit with the wrong needle tip because I can feel the difference in the needle size. So bonus there. Now what I'm going to do to set up my next cable and not get this wrong is I'm going to flip it around. Okay, so now that it's flipped around, here is my left side of my cable, and I'm just going to put that on. And then I'm going to put on my smaller needle tip on this side. And now I'm all set up with my interchangeable needles to knit in the round with 2 circular needles. Now, the only thing about this is your smallest needle in your set. Now, this is the set that I'm demonstrating with. These are my Knitter's Pride Carbons needle, which are carbon fiber. This is my smallest tip right here. This is a size 2 needle. Obviously, I can't go down another needle size, and I don't want to go up a needle size on my left-hand side. So if I were going to want to utilize 2 needle setup with a size 2 tip from this set, that might be the one tip, additional tips that I might buy for this. But buying one additional set of needle tips for your smallest needle in your interchangeable set is not so cost prohibitive as buying an entire new set of interchangeable needles so that you can use a 2 needle setup. So yeah, I just really love this technique. I'm a big fan. Big fan. Big two circular energy in this room. Big two circulars energy. How about you? I would love to hear from you in the comments down below. What are some of your favorite ways of knitting in the round? Have you tried two circular needles? Do you like it? Do you loathe it? If you loathe it, I'd love to hear about why. Because, you know, it's not for everyone. This technique is not for everyone, and that's cool. Again, you're the boss of your knitting. You get to use the tips and techniques that work best for you. But if you haven't given this a try, and you haven't been happy with other methods of knitting small circumference, why not give two circular needles a go? You might find this to be the solution you've been looking for. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope that you enjoyed today's video and you got a lot of useful information. If so, please make sure to give this video a thumbs up, and to make sure that you never miss a new video or a live stream, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Hitting the notification bell and having your notifications turned on from YouTube means YouTube will let you know. They'll let you know when things are happening here at Carrie Craft Geek. Yeah, also you can always follow me on social media. Social media is all down in the description box, as well as my affiliate links. If you utilize one of my affiliate links when you're shopping, I might then earn a small commission, and that helps support my channel. And all those commissions, they help me buy materials for review, materials for demonstrations. It helps me upgrade equipment so I can improve my videos and hopefully keep growing this community. Again, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope that you have a wonderful day, evening, weekend, weeknight, whenever you may be watching this. And as always, happy health and happy knitting. Bye! So what do you need for two circular needles? Well, obviously you need two circular needles, which I have today. So if you can utilize two 16-inch needles, that I think is ideal for circular needle. Spin, spin, spin. You spin me round, round, baby, round, round. Sorry. There's gonna be some bloopers in this video, cause I was singing a bit. By the way, before I forget, at the end of the video, right here, probably, hopefully soon, you're gonna see a couple video suggestions pop up. If you'd like to watch another video of mine, I would love to hang out some more with you. And if you don't have time, that's cool. I understand. I'm still here when you're ready for more.